And I don't trash markets. They're here to stay. They're inescapable. They're unavoidable. The problem is, like any other human creation or legal construct, they can be used for ill if there's no means by which persons are rendered responsible, answerable, accountable. And that's what Democracy Matters is all about. How do we become responsible, accountable, and how do others become responsible, accountable, and answerable? What other dogmas? Aggressive militarism. And I'm not just talking about the recent imperial invasion that was immoral and illegal and unnecessary in Iraq. That's just the peak of an iceberg. Aggressive militarism is one in which you understand yourself as the colossus, the leviathan, the superpower, the hegemon, and think that somehow might makes right, that raw force and coercion is the means by which you mediate conflict. Reminds one of Plato's Republic with Thrasymachus, encountering Socrates, you might recall. Socrates talking about truth, moral consistency, integrity. Thrasymachus said that's outdated, that's played out, that's anachronistic. It's about might makes right. If we have the might, we define what's right. It's the bully mentality, imperial sensibility, and it's reflected in our everyday lives. It's tied to machismo identities. You saw the picture of Bush on one of the magazines standing like he's a gunslinger. Manifest destiny, the gunfighter nation. Conquer, dominate like Melville's Ahab in that classic written by that genius 32 years old Herman Melville. Moby Dick, 1851. That's how you make it from womb to tomb. You dominate, you conquer, you crush them. We see it on the home front. Cowardly brothers don't want to confront the boss, come home, attack the vulnerable sisters of all colors we talking about now. All colors we talking about. Machismo identity. That's how you make it through life. You don't organize, you don't debate, you don't mobilize, you don't bring power and pressure to bear. You fight your way through it. That's nothing but a pose and a posture. But when people are posing and posturing in that way with access to unbelievable military power, like the new hawks in the White House, like the new imperialists in the White House, then we got a problem. And of course the irony is what? The hypocrisy is what? In part, even the very army of the American empire is disproportionately working class young people, disproportionately black and brown young people. Brother Michael Moore points that out in an exemplary way, doesn't he? Congress, 435 members, only one of this children fighting in the war. I go to black churches and ask, how many of you all have relatives who are in the armed forces? 40, 50, 60% of them raise their hands. I remind my dear brothers and sisters at Princeton, especially the right-wing ones, who are so pro-war, pro-war, pro-war. I notice you're not in the army fighting. I got 4 cousins in the army fighting. So when I argue against the war, I got a personal connection. Because those soldiers in the war of all colors and genders and sexual orientation, their lives are just as precious as the innocent Iraqis who often have to bear the cost. We're talking about the equal value of each life across the board. And keep track of that, you see. And then there's the dogma of escalating authoritarianism. The truncated discussions in our public life. We just had 2 conventions of the 2 parties. Right? The milquetoast Democratic Party. Infomercial for John Kerry, who's yet to find his voice. He found his voice in 1971. I don't know what's happened since then. Part of it is that he's become part of a political system that's characterized in part by legalized bribery, normalized corruption, and institutionalized graft. And he doesn't have the courage to tell the American people the truth about how corrupt the very system that he's a part is. Reminds one of the Grand Inquisitor of Dostoevsky's great novel, and that prose poem, The Grand Inquisitor of Brothers Karamazov. He knows the system's corrupt, doesn't want to tell the truth about it, and thinks he can find some wiggle room. And I believe in wiggle room, don't get me wrong. But you will lose the respect and trust of fellow citizens if you don't tell them the truth that you know. And one of the reasons why 51% of our fellow citizens do not even participate in the political system is not, like old brother Sean Hannity said the other night in debate with me, because they're lazy. And they're not stupid either. No, they're not. Well, there might be a few stupid ones, brother. Now, I understand that. Absolutely, absolutely. But most of them are fed up. They're disillusioned. They're disengaged with a system that they know is disproportionately shaped by corporate interests and powerful lobbyists, and they feel as if their voices really do not make a difference. And when you're working hard the way the mass majority of Americans are, trying to make it from womb to tomb and make sure that their children are on the right track, then they don't have time to mess around with corrupt systems like that. So they don't vote. Now, I think that's short-sighted. But I'm not going to run and tell fellow citizens you ought to vote for a candidate because your life is going to qualitatively change because everything is at stake. Much is at stake, but not everything. And it's true that I, of course, as you can imagine, I'm very, very close to my dear brother Ralph Nader. Supported him in 2000. Been an exemplary citizen. No doubt about that. And I plan to pray for him this year, but not vote for him. Because even a milquetoast Democratic Party with Howard Dean and especially the young folk, disproportionately young fellow citizens injecting some energy into that party, is part of a anti-Bush united front. And even those milquetoast neoliberals have a role to play. And by milquetoast, I'm not just engaging in demagoguery. By milquetoast, what I mean is people who know how corrupt the system is but don't tell the truth about it. People who act as if you can deliver more than you can actually deliver. You have to have a social movement on the outside putting pressure on any set of politicians, or they become part of the very corrupt system that they enter to resist. Even the right wing understood that under Gingrich. And if we don't get big money out of politics, we're going to get locked in the same kind of cycle over and over and over again. And we have to have a Socratic discussion, an honest, candid discussion about it. If you don't get corporate interests disproportionately shaping both parties because they know whoever wins will still be beholden to them. An ordinary citizen's feeling as if, my God, does my vote really have the impact that it ought? And of course, I come from a particular tradition. It's a tradition that historically has focused on specific dogmas that America has often evaded and avoided and sidestepped and held at arm's length. And I'm talking about the Black Freedom Movement. And I say that phrase in all reverence because it's hard in our market-driven society to understand what went into the depth of conviction and commitment to wrestle with the dogma of white supremacy in a nation predicated in part on that dogma as the precondition for American democracy. I'm talking about genocidal attacks on indigenous peoples. I'm talking about moving borders of Mexican brothers and sisters where this state was once Mexico.